She was just a hotel maid, young, struggling, and heartbroken, quietly sobbing into her phone in a dim hallway, but she had no idea a billionaire guest overheard everything. The polished corridor of the Rosewood Summit Resort was meant for silent elegance, not emotion. But that night billionaire Damon Voss paused mid-step. From behind a staff-only door he heard it. A muffled sob, not curiosity but something deeper, compelled him to inch closer. Inside, sitting against a utility cart, a young maid clutched her phone, whispering tearfully, "I'm trying, Molly. I promise I'll find a way." Illyra, 22, slender with sun-kissed brown skin, a tangle of dark curls pinned under her cap and tired hazel eyes, wore a faded gray uniform with frayed sleeves. Her grief was raw, honest. Damon didn't speak. He simply watched from a respectful distance until she noticed him. Embarrassed, she stood quickly, wiping her tears with the edge of her apron. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, eyes downcast. He nodded once and walked away, but that moment stayed with him. It wasn't just pity, it was recognition. He knew what it meant to feel helpless, to fight for someone else's survival. The next morning, Illyra arrived early, hoping to avoid the man from the hallway. Her shift began with scrubbing floors in the atrium, her hands aching from yesterday's double. At the front desk, the receptionist called her name. "You've been requested," she said. In a private lounge, Damon stood in his signature tailored navy coat, white shirt crisp, salt and pepper hair neat, and icy blue eyes unreadable. "Miss Illyra Soto," she replied nervously. "I overheard your call last night," he said bluntly. "I want to offer you a job at my residence, not out of charity. You remind me of someone I once knew." She blinked, confused. "Why me?" "Because you didn't ask for anything." He handed her a card with an address in Windmere Valley. "If you're interested, be there Monday." Then he left. The offer seemed unreal. But Illyra needed more than belief. Her little sister needed treatment, and hotel wages barely fed them. Maybe this was fate. Illyra stood at the wrought iron gate of the Voss estate, heart pounding. Behind it rose an ivy-covered mansion nestled in foggy hills. She clutched her sister's photo in her coat pocket. Her reason. Damon opened the door himself. "No servants. You'll be the housekeeper. Hours are long, but you'll have evenings off. I trust you can manage things on your own." Inside, the home was warm, filled with books and soft music. Not what she expected. He gave her a room with a balcony and a small kitchenette. Over the next few days, Illyra brought order to dusty rooms and neglected corners. Damon never micromanaged. He observed quietly, offering occasional suggestions. Each night she'd call Molly, her 10-year-old sister with chronic asthma. "We're one step closer," she whispered. One rainy evening, Damon watched Illyra repair an old curtain, humming a lullaby in a language he didn't know. She moved with purpose, not bitterness. "Where did you learn to sew like that?" he asked. "My mother. She used to mend clothes for the whole village back in San Perosa," Illyra replied, eyes softening. "She said sewing binds not just fabric but people." He paused. "Why don't you use the old solarium upstairs? It has the light and space." From that day, Illyra turned the solarium into a studio. She began stitching in spare hours, fixing donated clothes from local drives. Soon, a few neighbors asked her for lessons. She didn't say no. Word spread about the maid with magic hands. A young widow, an immigrant father, a shy teenage boy. They all came to learn. Illyra turned the solarium into a community hub. Damon funded supplies without question. "You're building something," he said one night, offering her tea. "I'd like to help," quietly. She looked up, her eyes shining. "You already are." Her confidence bloomed. Her hands no longer trembled. She was no longer just surviving, she was building. And Damon, who hadn't let anyone in for years, found himself waiting for her laughter each evening. Illyra wasn't used to dining with billionaires. Yet here she was, sitting across from Damon Voss at a quiet table overlooking his moonlit garden. He served roasted vegetables and baked salmon himself. No staff, no spectacle. "You don't like to be surrounded by people, do you?" she asked. Damon chuckled softly. "I like to be surrounded by real people. And that's rare in my world." They spoke of books, of childhoods marked by loss. Her mother's early death, his estranged father. It was the first time they both admitted to loneliness. When she asked why he lived so privately, he said, "Everyone in my circle wants something. You're the first person who came here giving." There was no romance yet, no declarations. But something shifted that night. Their connection had moved from professional to personal, not by force, but by quiet mutual understanding. One afternoon, the hills flooded after heavy rain. Power flickered. Illyra checked on the workshop's donated materials, worried they'd be ruined. Damon joined her, carrying flashlights. Together they moved boxes and bolted the shutters. Their clothes were soaked, hands muddy, but they laughed through the chaos. Later, by candlelight, Damon brought 2 cups of hot chocolate. "You didn't panic," he said, impressed. I've had worse storms, Illyra replied. In San Perosa the river took our roof once. We slept in the school for 2 weeks. He looked at her with new eyes. You're not afraid of anything, are you? I'm afraid of giving up, she said. I can't afford that. The power returned by dawn, but something else had already been restored, trust. Illyra received a call that made her knees buckle. Molly's condition had worsened. She needed specialized treatment immediately. I'll find the money, she told the doctor, though she didn't know how. Damon watched her from the study doorway. When she returned to the workshop, he handed her an envelope. She opened it to find a voucher for the treatment clinic and transportation for Molly. I said this wasn't charity, he said, and it still isn't. This is an investment in you. Tears welled up, but Illyra didn't cry. Instead, she nodded. Then I'll make it worth every cent. Molly arrived by train, thin, wide-eyed, and clinging to her inhaler. Illyra embraced her fiercely at the station. Back at the estate, Damon had prepared a cozy guest room just for her. He even stocked it with storybooks and puzzles. Molly adored him immediately. He looks like a superhero, she whispered to her sister. Illyra smiled. He sort of is. Each evening they read stories together. Damon, who once avoided children and family dinners, found himself playing board games and helping with homework. Illyra noticed how his stern demeanor softened around Molly, and Damon noticed how complete his home felt with them in it. The mansion's back garden had long been neglected. Inspired by Molly's presence, Illyra decided to bring it back to life. She and the community workshop members worked weekends, planting sunflowers, herbs, and tomatoes. Molly even painted handmade signs, "Hope grows here." Damon watched from the terrace, moved by their unity. He joined in, planting roses near the fountain. Funny, he said, dirt on his hands. I used to think money could fix anything, but this is different, Illyra replied. Sometimes all people need is a little space to bloom. Damon's foundation hosted an annual gala, Suits, Gowns, Press. This year, Illyra was invited as guest of honor. She wore a simple but elegant white dress she'd sewn herself. As she stepped into the ballroom, whispers followed. Is that the maid? Someone sneered. She's his project, I hear. Damon, in a black tuxedo, approached. He raised a glass and addressed the room. Illyra Soto is not a project. She's a builder, a healer, and the founder of the Windmere Workshop. If anyone here questions her worth, feel free to leave. Silence fell. Respect followed. An article surfaced the next day. An old photo of Illyra's family in a refugee camp during the border crisis in San Perosa. The media questioned her background. Reporters swarmed the estate. Illyra sat on the garden bench, crushed. I've worked so hard. Now they'll only see this. Damon sat beside her. They'll see what I see if you don't hide, he called a press conference. Illyra stood beside him. Yes, she said into the mic. I grew up in poverty, but I never let it define me, and I never will. That day, she wasn't just Damon's employee or guest. She became a voice. Their relationship changed. No longer confined to quiet dinners or shared tasks, they began walking the hills together. They talked about the future, not just hers but his. Damon confessed he'd never imagined retirement or legacy until now. You've made me want things I thought I'd buried, he said. Illyra didn't answer immediately, but her silence said enough. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something fragile, sacred, and rising slowly. With Damon's support, Illyra opened a second sewing center in the valley's old railway depot. The grand opening drew hundreds. She trained volunteers, held classes, and started an employment initiative for single mothers. Molly, healthier than ever, gave a speech about her big sister's courage. Damon watched from the crowd, hands folded, eyes shining. He saw Illyra not as someone he'd helped, but as someone who'd transformed his world. Damon asked Illyra to meet him at the old garden bench, the place where she once wept over Molly's diagnosis. Now roses bloomed around them. He knelt. From his pocket he drew a velvet box. Inside, a ring shaped like a delicate vine with a single sapphire. Illyra Soto, he said softly, you've brought life into this place, into me. Will you stay, not as my maid, not as my guest, but as my partner? She whispered, yes, as tears fell freely this time. News of the engagement spread fast. Social media exploded with contrasting headlines. Billionaire marries his maid, modern Cinderella, power and love collide in the hills of Windmere. Some celebrated them, others questioned motives, but Illyra remained steady, refusing interviews. This isn't a fairy tale, she told a local journalist. It's a partnership built on purpose and pain, not fantasy. Damon stood beside her always, his silence as strong as her voice. He released a brief statement. I didn't rescue Illyra. She rescued this place, and reminded me how to live. They declined lavish wedding offers and kept plans private. At the estate, volunteers from the workshop gifted hand-sewn decorations. Molly insisted on being flower girl. Neighbors sent baskets of herbs, fabric, and handwritten notes of blessing. It was no longer about a billionaire and a maid. It was about a community rooting for something real. The garden, once abandoned and overgrown, now glowed with lanterns, petals, and laughter. On a golden afternoon, Damon and Illyra exchanged vows beneath the old olive tree they'd planted together. She wore a dress she designed herself, cream silk with lace from her mother's wedding scarf. Her dark curls were pinned with tiny gold flowers, her hazel eyes steady and shining. Damon wore a simple gray suit. No spotlight, no spectacle, just sincerity. Molly gave a speech that had half the crowd in tears. My sister saved me, and Mr. Damon saved us both, but I think love saved all three of us. They didn't have famous guests or press coverage. Just friends, neighbors, and people they had helped and who had helped them. The vows were short. Illyra promised to remain honest, curious, and brave. Damon promised to always listen, never rescue, and build side by side. After the wedding, Illyra and Damon didn't move to a foreign retreat or luxury villa. They stayed in Windmere. Together, they turned the mansion into a permanent foundation for women's education and community work. The solarium remained the heart of it all, renamed Illyra House. They expanded into digital classes, therapy groups, and microloans for seamstresses. Molly became the face of the youth program, often giving tours with her inhaler in hand and a notebook full of plans. Illyra was never referred to as Mrs. Voss in public statements. She signed everything. Illyra Soto Voss, director. Damon, once a shadowy figure in finance, became known as the man who invested not in stocks, but in second chances. The valley thrived, not because of wealth, but because someone believed in a crying girl with calloused hands. Years later, Illyra stood in the hallway of the old Rosewood Summit Resort, the place where it all began. She was there as a guest speaker for a conference on community renewal. As she passed the maintenance corridor, she paused, the same quiet hum, the same faint smell of polish. A new maid stood in the hallway, quietly ending a phone call, worry etched in her brow. Illyra approached her gently. "Is everything all right?" the maid stammered. "It's my daughter. She needs medicine we can't afford, but I'll figure something out." Illyra smiled warmly. "You will, but maybe I can help." She handed her a card that read, "Illyra House, Empowerment Through Skill and Support." The girl stared in disbelief. "You're her?" Illyra winked. "I was you once. All it took was one person seeing me." Years passed. The estate never grew quieter. It just grew fuller. Laughter echoed in every room. Seeds bloomed in every garden. Sewing machines clicked like beating hearts in the solarium. Illyra often said, "We weren't saved. We were seen." Damon, now with silver hair and a slower stride, still watered the roses. Molly prepared for college and urban development, and Illyra mentored women from across the country. Every week she'd walk the hallway that once held her tears. She kept the mop bucket there, untouched, as a quiet monument, not to pain but to beginnings, and in every speech she gave, she ended the same way. One quiet cry changed everything. So listen, don't just pass by, you might just hear the start of someone else's revolution. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of resilience, connection, and unexpected love, because sometimes the smallest moments lead to the biggest changes.